Welcome to Pie Crust. This is another day in the hot bakery at West Leyden. Okay, so you are going to be making pie crust. So you're going to start with some flour, and we need 2.5 cups. And this recipe makes enough for a double crust pie or 2 single crust pies. Okay. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be demoing all of the pie fillings, and we're going to make small tarts so that we're not going to have, all these pies to be trying to eat this summer. So we're going to combine the sugar, the salt, and the flour. So the flour is our structure. The sugar is going to add just a small amount of sweetness and help our pie crust brown. And then the salt helps is flavor. It's all flavor. Okay. So what's very important here is that you whisk these together, and it serves several purposes. One, it breaks up any clumps in the flour and helps it, mix easier. And 2, you don't want to bite your pie crust and get that whole pile of salt. All right, you want the salt and the sugar evenly dispersed through the flour. Okay? Okay. So pie crust is flaky. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut in our fat into the flour. That's called cutting in. And to cut in, you use a pastry blender. You can also use a food processor, but you have to be careful with that you don't overmix. All right, so what's going to happen is we're going to have all these little balls or little pieces of fat covered with flour. Then when we roll it, they're going to get flat. And then when it bakes, the fat will melt, leaving a little air pocket. And that's where you get all your flakes. All right, so if you kind of picture saltine crackers, all those little air pockets in a saltine used to have fat in them. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to add our fat. And we need a 1/2 cup, we need 12 tablespoons of butter. So we need 1.5 sticks. All right. So there's our 1.5 sticks. And I'm going to cut this in smaller pieces just to make it a little bit easier to cut in. Okay. And then we need a 1/2 cup of shortening. Now, the butter is going to make the pie crust nice and flavorful. And the shortening is going to help shorten the gluten strands. All right, so that you have a real nice crust. So I'm just going to start by covering all this with flour, and you just start cutting. So this is like using 5 knives all at the same time. And then I'm going to shake it out. I'll scrape it off here. And then you just keep going until all of this is very, very small. All right, so you just keep moving that fat through the flour, and as it piles up on here, you can scrape it off. Eventually, it won't do that at all once it's all been covered with flour. So we'll be back in just a minute when this has all been cut. Yesterday, you made your pastry dough, and your ball will be much bigger because you're making a full-size pie. For the purpose of these demos, I am making small little tarts. Okay, so I am going to demonstrate this is a 1 crust pie, and this will work for your lemon custard pie and your pecan pie. All right, so what we're going to do is you're going to get some wax paper or parchment paper, either one, and you're going to flour it. So you just spread some flour around on here. Okay, all right. Now you have your pie dough, and if it's the better of a shape or a sphere it is, the better easier it'll be. And then you smash it into a disc, okay? And then you turn this upside down on it. Now, when you roll it, I'm going to go up and down, left and right, and then kitty corner. So I start in the middle, I go up and back. Now notice I'm not running off the edge, because if you do, your pie crust will get paper thin there. Then I'm going to go left and right. I did turn the paper. And now I'm going to go kitty corner. And I'm going to go again. And that way it'll help preserve something that resembles a circle. So I'm just going to start over to the top to the bottom. Top to the bottom. And then I'm going to do my angles. Now we're going to see how we're doing on size. We need to be about 1.5 inches bigger than our pan, upside down. So we just need a little bit more right over here. So I'm just going to press a little harder and push some dough out that way. And we're in pretty good shape here. So what you do is you peel off this top piece of wax paper. Now, if you put a little bit of flour here and rub it around, it'll make handling this pie dough much easier. You don't want mountains of flour on here, just a dusting. Okay, I'm going to fold that in half and peel off this paper very gently so you don't tear your pie crust. And again, just a little sprinkling, a little dab will do ya. Okay, this will fold over and peel this off very gently. And I'm going to flip it out. Okay, this is the corner of your pie crust. You will have a much bigger pan, so it'll be easier to do it that way. On these little pans, I'm just going to do a half at a time and then open it up. Okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to go around and push it down into the pan. You don't want to press it. That will stretch your pie crust. And when it bakes, it'll just go right back to where it was, and then you'll have a very ugly pie. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is kind of go and fix these creases. Now, chances are, in a full-size pie tin, you will not have any of these creases. Those pans flare out more, so the dough lays nicer in them. The tart pans are more upright. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go around. Now I'm a little shy over here, so we're going to just do some mending, and I'm a little long over here. So I'm going to take some of this and we're going to add it to my shy side. Okay, so I'm just going to put it underneath here and we're going to start rolling. Okay, so you roll the pie crust to make a nice wall here, and as you know, or as you can see, I'm on top of the pie pan. You do not want to put any of it underneath the pie pan, or you'll be baking your pan into your pie and you can't get your pie out without breaking it. Okay. All right. Okay, we're almost done here. Okay, this is going pretty fast because it's just a tart-sized pie. All right, here we go. So now you want to try to make this wall look pretty nice and even. The nicer and more even your wall is, the better your pie will look when it's done. Okay. Now we need to flute it. So you press down and you squeeze. So I'm pressing and then I'm squeezing. Press, squeeze. Okay, so now this crust is ready for your lemon meringue or your pecan filling. Right now we have 7 tablespoons of water in here, and you can see that the dough is definitely sticking together. So one test is you can take some and kind of flatten it and see if it's going to hold its shape. Now, this dough, it will hold its shape, but it keeps breaking just a little bit. So what we want to do is we're going to just add 1 more tablespoon. Now, I want you to know that I did a lot of stirring and pressing this through the dough. You don't do a quick stir and say it's too dry. You really take the fork and work it through the dough so that it becomes nice and mixed. So we're going to add in 1 more tablespoon, and we're going to move this through. So you can see that our dough is holding its shape in a ball real nicely. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to form this into a ball. And depending on what your instructor says, if you're making a pumpkin pie is a 1-crust pie, so you could divide this in half right away. A cherry pie is a 2-crust pie because we're going to do a lattice top. So you could go ahead and divide this in half if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half, and you form each of these into a ball. And then you're going to wrap these in plastic wrap and label them. And you may, after you wrap them in plastic wrap, put them in a Ziploc so it's easy for your group to grab them. And then they'll be ready for you tomorrow. If you take a look at this, we have all of those big clumps of fat. Almost all of them are gone. Okay, so you can see we have all these little pieces. And if you see any large ones, you can just finish cutting those in. But for the most part, you should have no more big pieces of fat. And all of that's done just by constantly cutting, 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 cutting. All right, so at this point we are done with our pastry blender. Now students, for some reason, seem to think this is really useful for stirring. It's not useful for stirring at all because all the dough gets stuck in there. This is never used for stirring. It's just for cutting in fat. So we're going to move that out of the way. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is add our water. Now I have found that forks are the easiest thing to use to stir in the flour. Better than a spoon, better than a pastry blender, or not a pastry blender, a rubber scraper. All right, so I'm going to use a fork. Now, what you want to do is you want to get this dough to stick together, but you do not want it too wet. It should not be sticky, but it should be sticking to itself. So we're going to add the water 1 tablespoon at a time because once you go too far, you're done. Now, lots of experiments have been done, trying milk, trying cold water, trying warm water, and even trying vodka as the liquid, because vodka will not react with the flour, but it will cause it to stick together. And then when it gets cooked, there's really no flavor to vodka, and all that alcohol cooks off. So they have found that vodka is actually the best, but the school frowns upon us using that, so we go to the second best, which is ice water. This is the second best. And we're going to add 1 tablespoon at a time, and we're going to add up to 8. So I'm going to sprinkle this in, and you stir. And at the beginning, you're not going to see any difference at all. All right? Now, the reason the recipe says 6 to 8 is it depends on how humid it is as to how much water your flour will take. So they have to allow a buffer. Okay? So that was 1. So here is 2. And I just made some ice water in my measuring cup. You can do that for your whole table so everybody can share the same container. That way you have fewer dirty dishes. Okay, here will be 3. And you do not want ice cubes. Ice cubes will do nothing for you. And that tablespoon was a little shy. Okay. You can see here in the middle how things are just starting to stick together. And that was with 3 tablespoons of water. Granted, we still have a little ways to go. The dough was starting to clump up. Now what I'm doing is I'm pressing through the dough with the fork, which will help disperse that water all through it. Okay. Okay, so here is tablespoon number 4. And we will be back we'll come back at 6 tablespoons.